Carrier strike groups are designed to be untouchable. Layers of sensors, rings of escorts, aircraft above, submarines below. Everything about them is built around one idea. Nothing gets close without being seen, until something does. The moment silence broke, it started quietly. On a US destroyer operating as part of a carrier strike group, an acoustic operator noticed a change. Subtle but unmistakable. A sound where there should have been none. Not loud, not fast, but present. A low-frequency signature emerged from the ocean background, cutting through ambient noise like a blade. What made this different? Submarines don't just appear, especially not inside a carrier screen, the layered defensive zone surrounding an aircraft carrier. Anything that close is supposed to be detected long before it arrives. And yet, this contact was already there. Unverified. Initial identification. Unverified OSINT. Later suggested the acoustic profile was consistent with a Chinese nuclear-powered submarine, possibly operating under ultra-quiet conditions. No official confirmation of class or identity was released. What mattered wasn't what it was where it was, inside the carrier screen. The carrier screen isn't a line on a map, it's a living perimeter, constantly shifting, adjusting, reacting. Breaking it doesn't mean crossing a boundary, it means defeating multiple detection layers without triggering alarms, which raised an immediate question: how long had the submarine been there? The silence before the response. No alarms sounded across the fleet, no sudden turns, no dramatic maneuvers, because panic is the enemy of control. Instead, the strike group tightened inward, subtly, deliberately. Data links synchronized, sensor priorities shifted, acoustic history was reviewed backward in time. The past suddenly mattered more than the present. What the data revealed, operators began rewinding sensor logs, minutes, hours, then longer. Patterns emerged, faint disturbances that had been dismissed earlier as background noise. They weren't noise, they were breadcrumbs. Unverified, duration estimate. Some unverified analysts later speculated the submarine may have been operating inside the outer defensive layer for an extended period before detection. This remains unconfirmed, but even the possibility was alarming. Why a nuclear sub is a different threat. Diesel submarines hide near coasts. Nuclear submarines hunt endurance. They can stay submerged for months. They don't need to surface. They don't need to rush. If a nuclear submarine breaks silence, it's usually by choice, and choices at sea are messages. The sound that changed everything. Then came the confirmation. The acoustic signature sharpened. A consistent rhythm. A controlled power curve. No longer ambiguous. This wasn't environmental noise. This was propulsion. The submarine had activated something. The carrier group reacts without moving. The carrier maintained course. That decision mattered. Turning away would suggest surprise. Accelerating would suggest fear. Holding course signaled confidence. The escorts, however, adjusted slightly, positioning themselves to control underwater geometry, not to attack, to contain. Unverified ASW posture. Unverified reporting suggests multiple ASW platforms shifted to passive tracking modes. No confirmation of active sonar use was released. Silence still ruled the engagement. Why? Breaking silence is dangerous. When a submarine breaks silence, it exposes itself, but only partially. It reveals just enough to be noticed, and that's often intentional. It forces the opponent to ask, is this a warning, a test, or a prelude? None of those answers are comforting. The air wing feels the pressure. Above the ocean, flight operations adjusted, not cancelled, not surged, adjusted. Aircraft spacing changed, patterns widened. The carrier wasn't reacting to what it saw, but to what it suspected. The submarine moves, again. Then the contact shifted, course change, slight increase in speed, still inside the screen, still close. The submarine wasn't fleeing, it was maneuvering. Unverified, maneuver analysis. Some unverified assessments later suggested the movement aligned with shadowing behavior, maintaining relative position without closing distance. These interpretations remain speculative, but shadowing carries a message of its own. The most dangerous possibility: a submarine inside the carrier screen doesn't need to attack to be effective. Its presence alone forces defensive focus, alters operational tempo, changes decision-making, and in extreme cases, it changes deterrence calculations. Commanders face the dilemma. At this point, US commanders faced a choice: escalate detection and risk-revealing capabilities, force the submarine out, and risk confrontation. Observe quietly and gather intelligence. They chose observation. For now, the submarine sends its strongest signal yet. Moments later, something happened that removed any remaining doubt. The submarine adjusted depth, not deeper, shallower, just enough to increase detectability, just enough to say, "I know you hear me." The ocean holds its breath. No weapons were armed, no warnings transmitted, but the encounter had crossed a psychological threshold. signaled. The submarine wasn't lost. It wasn't surprised. It was confident. The final seconds before the turn. Then abruptly, the acoustic signature changed again. This time, dramatically. Power levels spiked. Control surfaces shifted. The submarine prepared for a major maneuver. The Chinese nuclear submarine had made itself known inside the US carrier screen, and now it was about to do something that would force the entire strike group to reassess the situation. The change was immediate. Across multiple sonar displays, the submarine's acoustic profile sharpened. Not louder, but clearer. This wasn't noise anymore. It was intent. The move that forced a decision. The submarine didn't accelerate wildly, it didn't dive deep. Instead, it executed a controlled depth and course adjustment, one that experienced operators recognized instantly. This was not evasion, this was positioning. Why this was alarming? Inside a carrier screen, positioning matters more than proximity. A submarine doesn't need to be close to be dangerous, it needs to be aligned. Aligned with movement, aligned with timing, aligned with opportunity. And this one was. The carrier strike group locks in. The strike group entered what planners call full undersea focus. Nothing dramatic happened on deck, but below the surface, everything changed. Escort ships tightened their geometry. Sensor overlap increased. Every potential gap vanished. This wasn't panic. This was precision. Unverified escort coordination. Unverified reporting later suggested destroyers coordinated movement to restrict underwater maneuver corridors without using active sonar. No official confirmation was released, but the effect was clear. The submarine's freedom of movement was shrinking. The submarine makes its intent clear. Then came the second signal. The submarine altered speed, slightly faster than before, while maintaining its relative position. Shadowing. This was no longer coincidence. It was deliberate tracking. Why shadowing is a power play. Shadowing a carrier means something very specific. I am not lost. I am not surprised. I am choosing to be here. It's a psychological maneuver as much as a tactical one. The air wing enters the equation. Above the waterline, the carrier's air wing quietly adapted. No dramatic launches, no emergency scrambles, but patterns shifted. A SW-capable aircraft expanded patrol arcs, helicopters adjusted hover zones, sensor coverage deepened, everything layered. Unverified airborne ASW. Some unverified OSINT suggested airborne ASW assets were repositioned to reinforce passive detection. These claims remain unconfirmed. Still, the pressure was mounting. The submarine's biggest gamble. Then the submarine did something risky. It reduced depth again, not to the surface, but shallow enough to increase exposure. That choice carried danger. Shallow water amplifies detection, limits escape routes, invites counter-moves, which meant the submarine was betting on one thing, that the US Navy would not escalate. The command dilemma, inside command spaces, the calculus tightened. Every option carried consequence. Force a retreat, risk escalation, activate active sonar, reveal capabilities, hold posture, invite prolonged presence. The decision was to signal dominance without contact. The signal, silent and unmissable. One escort adjusted speed, another altered bearing, not aggressively, but with intent. To the untrained eye, it looked like routine maneuvering. To the submarine's crew, it was unmistakable. Space was being controlled. Unverified, sub-reaction window. Unverified analysis later suggested the submarine responded within minutes of escort adjustments. This remained speculative, but consistent with observed behavior. The turning point. Suddenly, the submarine changed course, not toward the carrier, not parallel anymore, away. Speed increased, depth increased rapidly. This was no longer signaling, this was disengagement. Why this moment mattered most. Breaking silence gets attention. Leaving under pressure reveals outcome. The submarine had tested the carrier screen and chosen not to press further. That decision spoke louder than its initial approach. Loss of contact. As the submarine descended, its acoustic signature weakened, then fragmented, then disappeared entirely. The ocean reclaimed its silence, but no one relaxed, because loss of contact does not equal loss of threat. What the US Navy gained, even without confrontation, the encounter delivered critical insight, acoustic behavior under pressure, maneuver preferences, reaction timing, depth change patterns. This is intelligence you cannot simulate. Unverified intelligence value. Unverified reports suggested the data collected may influence future ASW training and doctrine. No official statements confirmed confirmed this. Still, the value was real. What China was signaling. This was not an attack. It wasn't even a provocation in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration of access, a message that Chinese nuclear submarines can penetrate advanced defensive screens, at least temporarily. Whether that message landed as intended is debatable. Why this could have escalated fast. One misinterpreted maneuver, one overreaction, one false sensor reading. Any of it could have turned a silent encounter into a crisis. This is how modern wars don't start with explosions. They start with mistakes. The strategic balance holds. Instead, restraint prevailed. No warnings issued, no weapons armed, no headlines released. Just professionals doing what they are trained to do. The aftermath, unseen but important. Long after the submarine vanished, analysis continued. Logs reviewed, scenarios replayed, decisions dissected. Encounters like this echo for months, sometimes years. Unverified, doctrinal impact. Some analysts believe such encounters influence future carrier protection strategies and undersea doctrine. These assessments remain speculative, but patterns shape preparation. The big picture. This wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about boundaries. How close is too close? How quiet is quiet enough? How much pressure invites response? On this night, both sides approached the edge and stepped back. A Chinese nuclear submarine broke silence inside a US carrier screen. It tested detection, tested restraint, tested resolve. The US Navy responded not with force, but with control. And control remains the most powerful weapon at sea. The most dangerous confrontations don't explode on radar screens. They unfold slowly, beneath the waves, in darkness, guided by discipline. This encounter ended quietly, which is exactly why it matters.